Welcome to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Ralph Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. I'm so glad you're joining us. We have a great show for you. We start out talking about the importance of having the freedom to read age-appropriate educational materials. Seems like a no-brainer, but guess what? We have to fight for it. After that, we touch base on the beauty of purple places in the United States of America. Following that segment, we dive into Black Maternal Health Week and how you can take action. And then we close the show talking about the student loan crisis that people are facing all across America and how to take action on that as well. We're going to jump right in with our first guest. And we are joined by a spectacular leader and guest, McKenna Samson, who's with Freedom to Read. Welcome, McKenna.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here and to be able to represent the Freedom to Read team at PEN America.
Let's talk about PEN America and Freedom to Read because, hello, we love them at Moms Rising. Moms across America love them. Can you share for people who aren't as familiar with PEN America and Freedom to Read what you all are and what's happening?
Sure. PEN America is a free expression organization. We focus mainly on literary topics and issues. We also cover issues here in the United States domestically, and we also work with writers abroad, and we really focus on the freedom to read, the freedom to write, and the freedom to learn. The Freedom to Read team, which I am representing today, is our K through 12 team, and we have been established since 2021. We have been tracking book bans across the United States in public schools over the last 5 years, and we are continuing on with our book ban research and tracking at this moment. And part of that is also tracking legislation that impacts the freedom to read and impacts access to books, and makes it easier for folks who are seeking to censor books in the classroom to do so. And so we are also tracking some of those really harmful bills that have been introduced or have been passed on the state and federal levels.
One thing that's really important and that I can't believe that I'm asking, can we say hello 2026? You have to ask the obvious questions. Here we go. Why is freedom to read important? Yes, I had to ask that.
The freedom to read is important because book bans and the movement to censor books and remove books from classrooms and library shelves have been on the rise. They are a very organized movement and they have been active for the last several years. In doing so, they have actually impacted the amount of books that are accessible. Nearly 23,000 books that we have tracked since the year 2021 have been censored from classrooms and libraries across the United States in public schools. So with that growing number, we want to make sure that we are really on top of understanding where these bans are coming from on a local level, because they are primarily coming on a local level, but also ensuring that we are keeping track of where they're happening and why they are happening.
And as we're looking at the freedom to read and the importance of books, sometimes people are like, we only have to read short one-sentence things on social media, or maybe we only need 10 seconds of a video on social media. But no, we need critical thinking in the United States of America, and we need empathy. Studies show that even if you just read a Harry Potter book, you increase your empathy by like a bazillion trillion. Yes, I did make up that number. I admit it. But we need empathy now more than ever. And you don't necessarily get empathy from a one-sentence kind of content that you read. You need a book. You need to pretend that you're walking in somebody else's shoes. Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about how getting away from book culture is kind of hurting our critical thinking and our learning for young people? And so when we limit the books and the ways that people can walk into other people's shoes, we're limiting our critical thinking, our empathy, our ability to think about things from multiple angles. And we need to think about things from multiple angles to have solutions. And so I'm mad about book bans. I'm sure you can tell. But I wondered if you could share your perspective on the importance of just being able to immerse yourselves and ourselves in another world through books.
Sure. Books can oftentimes be the very first time that a student is learning about different cultures, different people, different experiences in the world that they themselves may not particularly have experienced. So they can learn more about their peers, the world. They can form their own opinions from reading books, whether they are fiction or nonfiction, because you can learn a lot from both of those genres. It's also oftentimes validating for some students. If they don't see themselves reflected in literature or in the world around them, it can be very distressing for them. So having access to books in which they see themselves in characters, or they can relate to memoirs about real people, or they can relate to history about things that are important to them, it allows them to elevate themselves, to open their minds, like you had said, developing more empathy for one another. And without access to books in which, they maybe will not have the opportunity to have that access, it can definitely impact their ability to learn more about other people. You find people are often maybe a bit more closed-minded. They are ignorant of the world around them. They are unsure of things of which they have never learned about. So it's important to have access to books because it really can be an outlet and a channel to experiences that you maybe have never had before, and maybe it'll help you learn more things about yourself as well.
There's some really bad legislation that's been introduced to ban books, and sometimes the legislation can have a title that says one thing but actually mean something else inside the legislation. I'm wondering if you could talk about how Republican leaders in Congress are attacking access to books and attacking the freedom to read and attacking education. What's happening? What are the bills that are in Congress right now that we should all be aware of?
So HR 7661 was introduced in the last couple of months, and it has absolutely become the topic of conversation in many of the literary circles, especially with other authors as well. So this is a great example of Congress tasking itself with deciding what books belong in schools. And it's very problematic because it really does show that it's a government overreach, and it really affects public schools and libraries. Oftentimes, these decisions are made on a local level within the school district, and the federal government is essentially putting itself in the shoes of the local school district and, making these decisions for them. Luckily, this bill is still being heard in Congress, so it has not been passed, but it did get voted out of the Education Committee, so that is an issue, but it essentially would limit the books that are available to students, and it would erase queer and trans people from books and classroom materials.
So, how can people take action?
So, the first mode of action that we are definitely encouraging folks is that while this is a very scary legislation and it may feel like it is, telling you what to do, we are urging people not to overcomply because you are making it a lot easier for the folks who are sponsoring this bill to, assert their dominance over what we are teaching children in the classrooms and the books that they have access to. We are also urging people to visit our website, pen.org, and fill out our every action letter to write to your local representative and urge them not to support this bill. The bill really does focus on a very limited number of books that would impact the trans community, the LGBTQIA community, as well as books that feature people, characters, and stories of color. But they are also asserting that it is appropriate that classic works that they have defined are appropriate for the classroom. And so it essentially would continue to censor identities, which really is so problematic. And we want to make sure that they are not going to have their job made any easier for them.
Do you think there's hope, and what's giving you hope right now?
I do think that there is hope. I think that oftentimes you see that when we are in situations that can be very difficult right now with all of the difficult issues going on across the world, both within the literary world and the general world around us, that folks are not going to be comfortable. They're not going to be happy with these conditions, and they're going to want to see change, whether that is in the form of voting for representatives that definitely reflect how they are feeling, or if it is protesting. There are different ways that folks can resist some of the harmful policies that we are seeing, but particularly using their voice to stand up for themselves, their families, their community members, that is what's giving me hope, seeing that folks have been very outspoken and are continue to be outspoken. It really makes me happy to see folks using their platforms, particularly authors, to speak up for themselves, to speak up for members of their community, to speak up for their peers. Students are also showing up for themselves. They are doing school walkouts. They are writing letters to the administrators in their schools. We are seeing teachers also participating, as well as librarians. So knowing that people within the community are caring about one another gives me a lot of hope. And while, working in this space, it can be very limiting, and just seeing some of the negative, it does make me happy to know that there are folks who want to see change and are definitely working towards that change.
And one of the things, I agree with you on all of that, but one of the things that's giving me hope is that we have been winning these book ban wars at the state level, and in states that are not necessarily red or blue or any kind of thing, but purple places. And so when we look at polling, particularly of moms, over 80% of moms, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Libertarians, they want their kids to be educated and have access to appropriate educational material that teaches critical thinking. And when you look at what's in a lot of these book bans, that is totally appropriate educational material that's age appropriate. Like, don't listen to the hype, people, if you hear about these book bans and hear kind of like, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation about what's in the books that are being banned. And, some of my very favorite books as a young person are on some of the ban lists. I'm like, what the heck? I learned so much from those books. And do you have a favorite banned book?
So my favorite banned book is actually The Bluest Eye by Toni
I
Morrison.
love that book.
It was definitely one of the more mature books that I read when I was in high school, but it was actually presented to me in my high school English class as a banned book, and it made me more interested in actually reading the book. Toni Morrison is one of the most banned authors for sure across the board, but I think a lot of her literature is very important, and I'm very thankful to be able to have access as an adult, but also when I was in high school, to that book. And I think that it is incredible and had such a great lesson at the end of it too.
I agree. I mean, I need to go reread that. But when I was younger, also in high school, reading The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, hello, if you haven't read it yet, please read it. That was a formative book for me. It was a book where you think like, okay, it was an immersive book. Obviously, she's a spectacular writer that really brings you into a story, and you experience kind of walking in somebody else's shoes in a way that gives an important perspective that maybe you wouldn't have had if you didn't read that book. And so I think that book is a great example of a banned book that, was public school curriculum for me growing up. This is not an inappropriate book at all. It's in fact very appropriate for expanding our ability to think critically about what policies will and won't help people, how people are experiencing life, all the things, all the things. Do you have another favorite banned book? Now I want to know.
Oh, I also really love All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. I know that was it's in our banned book index, which is also on our website, and they are just a fantastic author. I have both the hard copy and I listened to the audiobook as well because I was reading the book on vacation, and it's a fantastic memoir. And you just learn so much about the experience that they had growing up and the family structure. And I think it was just a very heartfelt book, and I really love the memoir. I also had the opportunity to meet them when I was in DC. This was probably a year or two ago at the Congressional Black Caucus annual legislative conference, and they were so nice.
Oh, I love that book too. You have good taste in books. Hello. I love that book. Oh, this is interesting. So great. Okay, now we only have about a minute left, and I want everybody to join, support, pay attention to both Freedom to Read and Pen America. Can you share how people can track, stay involved, get involved over time? Where can they find you?
You can find us at our website, pen.org, pen.org. We are also on Blue Sky at Pen America. We are also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and we are also on Threads.
Thank you so much. Do you have any parting words for people with last advice about how to save your favorite books?
My parting words for you are do not overcomply. Some of this legislation is to scare you and it is to make you feel uncomfortable, but you do not want to make their job any easier by doing so. And also not to lose hope. I know that things are difficult at this moment, but they won't be difficult forever.
That is such good advice. Such good advice. Thank you so much for being on McKenna Samson with Freedom to Read and PEN America. Thanks for all you do. Thank you for keeping the books open for us all to read. Thank you for keeping freedom available. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Stick around. We'll be right back with our next guest talking about the beauty of purple places. We are joined by a superstar, Beatriz Beckford of MomsRising. Welcome, Beatriz.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
There have been a lot of inspiring on-the-ground moments happening despite the terrible, awful, very bad headlines that are coming across the major newspapers. Hope is rising locally. And recently, you facilitated a giant conversation that had standing room only in one of the top swing districts in Pennsylvania, PA 10. Hello, I remember that one. I'm like, PA 10. And this district is represented right now by a Republican in Congress. It is one of the districts that flipped to support Trump in the last election. So actually helped give the Electoral College for all of Pennsylvania to Trump. It's a big district, and you were recently there. What happened?
Oh my goodness, let's talk about Carlisle. I mean, what a magical place. And these purple places, we have to talk about them more. We have to be talking to people there more because they are in so many ways the epicenter of the tensions that we're navigating in this country. Carlisle was amazing, and that's the short and sticky of it. What was magical about it was the room. When you say the room was packed, it was packed. And it was packed with all kinds of people. There were babies, there were mamas, there was grandpas, there was sisters, there were children. So many people wanted to be there. As people were pouring in to attend, the line was all the way around the corner. It has 2 levels, and it's actually where we hosted it was this beautiful barn, and it has 2 floors, and from top to bottom, packed. When we started, it was complete silence not because people don't have anything to say, but because people wanted to hear from these elected officials about what was going on. This particular representative that represents them is not communicating with the constituents right now, so much so that when they go to the office, they are not being let in. And that's not what democracy looks like. That's not what people who are elected to office are supposed to be doing. And so these people came to share their gripes. They came to talk about what's happening. A lot of it was centered around the economy. A lot of it was centered around the fact that families are struggling right now, that costs are through the roof, and people want answers. And unfortunately, this particular representative is not giving it to them. And so there was an opportunity to talk to some other representatives to hear what's going on. People had a lot of questions about affordability. They had a lot of questions about what's happening with our schools, a lot of questions about what's happening with the economy. And I think that what they left there was a sense of clarity around what some of our more progressive politicians are doing, ways that they can support by joining organizations like MomsRising, by supporting some of the organizations that showed up to collaborate with MomsRising that are locally based. And what it really was, I think, reflective of was some of the institutions, particularly MomsRising and the grassroots groups that were there, are continuing to organize people in this space to be an institution where people can come and feel connected to the power that is being built, to the sort of brooding that we're seeing happening across the country. People want answers, they want it now, and they're ready to mobilize for it. And I think that's what we saw at Carlisle, that people are not, they're not feeling like paralyzed to action, right? And they were encouraged by some of the representatives to not be paralyzed, that the sort of chaos that we see, that the sort of inundation with bad news, what feels like bad news every day is purposeful, but that there was power in that room and you could feel it. And that people are ready to mobilize, they're ready to take action, and they're ready to stop this madness. And that was what was so beautiful about Carlisle. Purple places are magical places, and Carlisle was reflective of that, true and true.
I love that you said purple places are magical places. For people who don't know what a purple place is on the political map, often you will see blue representing areas that Democrats have the majority of people voting there, or you will see red representing areas where Republicans have the majority of people voting. Purple places are a mixture of blue and red in one community, in one map space. And oftentimes what happens in purple places is there is a lot of misinformation that's purposefully put out. There's a lot of disinformation that's purposefully put out. And yes, I've learned that those are two different tracks of malicious information. And they are traditionally put out more so by the MAGA contingent. And so when you go into a purple place, as we just heard Beatriz say, either people have had a lack of information or they've had mis and disinformation. Right. And so what we're hearing is a thirst for real human connection, for person-to-person information sharing, because of the sort of muck of dis and misinformation that often is pushed directly into purple places. But something else is special. I mean, a million things are special about purple places. They hold a special place in my heart too. Yeah. And one of the things is that a lot of people say that part of the problem with American society right now is that we stop talking at the point of disagreement. Right. But true dialogue begins when we can continue talking past that point of disagreement. And purple places are a place where that's possible. You can get in a room with people who don't agree on every single point, 150%, and still build that community, build that connection, and help build a better tomorrow. And I'm curious if you saw that in action in PA 10, Pennsylvania 10, which is a congressional district that is very much purple, where we just held that big community event with standing room only.
Yes, absolutely. I actually heard a conversation between two people. There was somebody who was running for a local seat. I don't remember what specifically the seat was, having a conversation with somebody who I think they had mentioned that they were like a construction worker. And they were saying that so the conversation went, I voted for Trump, but I didn't vote for this. And then that same person said, this is fascism. And then the construction worker said, well, I'm hearing that this might not be fascism, that it's egalitarian. And he struggled to get the word out, but then he said, this is a egalitarian, this is an oligarchy. And I was like, the fact that this language is even emerging in these spaces and that people are both educating each other about it, questioning, and doing it in the context of their voting decisions was really powerful. At the end of the conversation, I had a mom who had a brand newborn baby, I mean, brand new baby, come to us and say, as she left with her sister, just thank you for having the space to talk. I wanted to be in a room with people who were mad as hell too. And so I think that what I appreciate in Carla was that there was a lot of those conversations happening, right? They were happening in the way that the space was facilitated for sure, and what the elected officials that joined us that evening were offering. It was happening in the cross conversations that people were having before we started it and after. People stuck around for almost 45 minutes after the event was done. They were like, okay, y'all have to leave. People didn't want to leave because they're so hungry for a space to just, express the tension and the discomfort that we're all feeling right now with what's happening, and be in community with other people who see that what we're seeing is not right. Right? And that we're not powerless and we can do something about it. So all of the types of conversations that you just lifted up were happening in Carlisle. We need more of those types of conversations. We need more construction workers talking to people who are running for for smaller offices like town clerk or something like that. We need more moms with newborn babies in spaces with other moms and newborn babies to be able to be in community and be mad as hell together and feel like they can organize with other people in their communities, because so many of us are paying attention to what's happening at the national scale, but there's real power literally in the streets. We've seen it through the No King rallies. We see it in the way that people are having conversations online and in their communities. And I think that we also saw that in Carlisle with this space that was created for people to be, as she said, mad as hell together.
One of the things that was really interesting is how many leaders in Congress wanted to come and listen, you all. Leaders in Congress wanted to listen. And can you share a little bit about who was there listening and what were the biggest topics of conversation?
Yeah, I mean, we had a really wonderful surprise in having AOC join us. That was a last minute addition. And, people packed the room without even knowing she was going to be there. I think that, you can say that, Representative Ocasio-Cortez is going to be somewhere, and you can expect that there's going to be a lot of people that show up to hear her speak. But they didn't know until she showed up. That was not added to the program. That was not added to the agenda. It was shared when you saw her show up with the rest of the folks. And so what I think was also deeply appreciated was the recognition that folks have tried to do something, right? They all came knowing that these folks had been showing up to their representative's office, being shut out and being silenced. And what they recognized and affirmed for the folks in that room was that that's not okay, that we are also working for our constituents, but we're working for you too. I mean, Representative Cortez is a New York State representative, right? She doesn't represent PA 10, but she affirmed for many of those folks that she's there for them too, and that what they were experiencing was not okay. And I think every single representative that joined us that evening affirmed that for people, debunked the fact that, this idea that things aren't happening in Washington, and that folks are not, that, Democrats are not doing anything. They were able to say, no, we're doing all these things every day in service to the demands that we hear you make. And I think people needed to hear that too, because that was actually one of the questions that we got from the audience. Like, from our purview, it looks like nothing's happening. It looks like the Dems are doing nothing. So what are the things that we're missing? What are the things that you can tell us that you're doing every day to stop this madness? And I think people got an answer to that in a way that they needed, but also affirmed that the way that they were experiencing their representative was just not it. So, I think it's important for these types of things to happen, like for politicians to not just see the sort of constituency that they are elected to represent, but the American people, whether you're in a red state, you're in a purple state, you're in a blue state, that there are ways that we can be mobilizing and organizing, and that legislators can be legislating in service to all of us. And I think that was represented in Carlisle for sure, through Ocasio-Cortez and other folks.
It's so much hope. I just love how much hope it is in motion. And you all, I have some more hope things to share. I just have to. So I have to share a couple of things. Despite the fact that Donald Trump and Republican leaders in Congress are just an absolute disaster of undermining our healthcare policies and programs, undermining childcare, undermining access to healthy food, undermining our ability to afford the cost of living increases that their ridiculous program changes are making rise. Despite the fact that all that's happening, we know that their own Republican constituents across the country do not agree with what's going on, right? Like, polls show that the majority of people in America actually do want health care. They do want childcare. They do want the programs that our tax dollars pay for, and that we as constituents have prioritized across the political spectrum. Because of that, we're seeing some really interesting things happening at the state level. West Virginia, where there is a supermajority in the House of Republicans, a supermajority in the Senate of Republicans, and a Republican governor, we just helped pass a very strong child care bill. Florida, where there's also a supermajority of Republicans in the House and the Senate, and obviously a Republican governor, we just helped stop, with Republican votes on board with us, a really bad vaccine legislation at the state level. So we're seeing both in actually not just blue and purple places, but red places, that we are actually seeing people come together locally and winning in an increased way. And I think that's really important to note, that outside of the Beltway, outside of the US Capitol, outside of the MAGA influence, actual real people are coming together to make real positive, proactive changes. And what's your take on that? We only have about a minute left, but what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think, the Carlisle event is so representative that in the way that we share our stories. And what Carlisle really was about was people sharing their stories. And I mean, people that joined us in the space that asked questions, but also the representative that joined us. Representative Houlihan is a child of Holocaust survivors who works in the state of Pennsylvania in service to those folks too, and shared that. Representative Leguer Fernandez is a domestic violence survivor who advocates heavily on behalf of women, and people needed to hear that and hear their story public, right? In the ways that she advocates for women and parents and caregivers who maybe experience domestic violence. Representative Boleyn was sharing the work that she does to support LGBTQ communities, and they were definitely in the room as well. And so, there were so many things that people shared, but ultimately it came down to sharing stories. And I think that's what was important, and that's what we need to keep doing.
150%. Thank you so much, Beatriz Beckford, for coming on. Thanks for all you do. Thank you for sharing the hope. Thank you for sharing that we see change and people connecting in red, blue, and purple places all over the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Don't go away. Next up, we're talking about Black Maternal Health Week and why it's so important. We have a spectacular, amazing, nation-lifting guest with us today. I'm so excited. A return guest. Woohoo! We have Tina Sherman, who is coming with us from MomsRising. Welcome, Tina.
Thank you so much, Kristen. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited that you're here because you are coming here with a giant, enormous victory that you helped bring to life. And I'm wondering, it's Black Maternal Health Week, but also Big Victory Week. What just happened?
We are so excited. So first of all, it is Black Maternal Health Week, and the theme this year is rooted in justice and joy. And so building on that theme, we are so excited that here in North Carolina, our governor, North Carolina's Governor Josh Stein, signed a Black Maternal Health Week proclamation, signifying the state's commitment and their desire to work to end the Black maternal health crisis in North Carolina. And we were so excited to be surrounded by our legislative champions, Senator Natalie Murdoch and Senator Sidney Batch, as well as the entire North Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, really loud and proud, standing from a point of justice and joy, but celebrating this moment that the governor and his entire administration is looking at addressing the Black maternal health crisis. So we're excited that this is happening in North Carolina. We know that there are other proclamations happening across the country, and we are excited to be celebrating the week with the founders, Black Mamas Matter. And short tidbit, it is their 10th year celebrating Black Maternal Health Week. Important to note.
That is such a big victory. Congratulations. And I'm wondering if you could set the stage for us all, listeners, audience, about why it's a big victory. What is the Black maternal health crisis in America? And you all listeners, it is a big crisis. To you, Tina.
The United States is one of the worst countries, actually the worst developed country to give birth around the world. When we look at our sister countries, we are the worst. We rank the worst in maternal mortality and morbidity. And it is horrific for all birthing people. We know that more than 80% of maternal deaths are preventable. And when it comes to Black mamas, we are facing the disparity of rates. We're dying at rates 3 to 4 times more than our white counterparts. And that's regardless of socioeconomic status, that's regardless of education level, that's regardless of where you live. It is just the fact of being Black in America and giving birth. And so this week is meant to really surface the crisis, really name it, but also to celebrate Black joy and to celebrate all the mamas and all the families who do who to celebrate Black birth is really the importance of the week. And so that's where Rooted in Joy really come from, and just really celebrating the achievements that have been made to improve Black maternal health. But we certainly have a long way to go.
We have so far to go. What are some of the solutions?
Well, we know that we did not get here overnight. We know that this is going to be a multifaceted approach. We know that we need to look at things like social determinants of health, like housing and transportation, job access. We know that we also need to look at healthcare access. Really excited that we have won in the last few years postpartum Medicaid expansion, which is phenomenal because most of the births in the United States are actually funded by Medicaid, and so we're incredibly great. We're incredibly grateful that we have been able to secure that. But we're also facing huge cuts to Medicaid, thanks to this current administration, and so it's going to be a real struggle there. We also know that we need to see more providers, so really diversifying the maternal workforce and those serving families, and investing in community-based organizations, really ensuring that those organizations that are serving families in community have the resources that they need. And this is where we're really excited at some of the efforts, some of the conversations that are happening at the state level, at the federal level, to tackle these crises. But that's exactly why we have this week, to really help our lawmakers, to really educate the public around what the crisis is, and the fact that there are solutions. We just have to sort of put our money where our mouth is.
And how can people do that? What are the best ways for people to advocate?
First and foremost, sign up, MomsRising.org. We do what we can to share out when there are policy opportunities, when lawmakers are considering legislation. It's really important that we share our stories with our lawmakers. Also want to encourage you to follow our partners, our national partners at Black Mamas Matter, the founders, BMMA, the founders of Black Maternal Health Week. There are lots of organizations hosting a wide range of activities this week. Really want to encourage folks to get involved in your local community and activities that are happening on the ground this week.
And what kinds of activities or stories or engagement have you seen making the big difference? I mean, you just had this giant victory in North Carolina. What kinds of things did people do to help get that victory to happen? And I ask this because a lot of people are like, hey, it doesn't matter when my voice is heard. I'm giving up hope. The headlines are terrible. I mean nothing. Well, we know that you all mean everything. Like, your voice is so powerful. So I'm wondering if you can share, like, what were the tips and, things that people did in North Carolina to get that victory?
Yeah, it's listening to community voice and being in a community. I know that the headlines are horrible. I myself put myself on a media diet, is to not consume it all of the time. Really stepping away from the computer and really talking to your neighbors, getting out there. And that's sort of how this victory, this milestone came about in North Carolina. It's really the community coming together, and really figuring out how to lift up one another, and taking that to our lawmakers and taking that to the governor. That's where this all began. And we know that there's, I've heard of some community partners having a dance party, some community partners having a walk and a stroll to raise money, and to just raise awareness, raise money in the community, raise awareness. And so really getting out in the community is kind of one of those first steps. So get out, touch your neighbor, talk to your neighbor, touch some grass. Don't sit behind that keyboard all the time, and turn off the TV, turn off the radio, and get out and talk with your neighbors.
Talk with your neighbors, remind them that they can call their local leaders. You can call your state legislative offices, talk to the office, tell them what you care about, share your story, and share the stories of other people too. Because sometimes people don't realize, for example, that we have a Black maternal health crisis in the United States of America, and it is a really big crisis. Just to repeat what Tina said, Black women are 3 to 4 times as likely to die in childbirth as white women. That is not okay. And the United States of America is the only industrialized nation where we have increased maternal morbidity, meaning more women dying in childbirth, than decreased maternal morbidity. And so instead of having moms' lives saved, we are losing moms all over the country. That is not okay. This is a crisis, and it's absolutely not okay that it's disproportionately impacting Black moms. So everybody needs to get together to talk. Share your birth story, you all. Sharing your birth story is terrifying and also enlightening, because a lot of times, for whatever reason, and Tina, I'm so curious why you think this happens, but for whatever reason, it's not actually that common that you're like, hey, let me tell you about my gory birth story. but you learn some things when you hear some birth stories. Why do you think we don't talk about it more often?
we need to normalize sharing the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between, because we absolutely need, we need to share it with each other to normalize what we experienced, and because you're not the only one who's experienced it, and then I also don't want folks who've had wonderful birth stories to be worried about sharing those either. We need
Ooh,
both.
yeah.
Right? We
Yeah.
need that hope. And also, if you had a great birth story, I want to hear and understand and then be able to share back what worked and why. Did you have a wonderful OB that listened to you? Did you have a midwife who really was there by your side? Did you have a doula who was there to support you and explain what was going on? Did you have a lactation consultant who was able to help you, get that first latch? Or did you have none of that? And so hearing all of the stories, I don't know, I think sometimes that we don't want to share our stories, like you said. We don't want to scare other moms.
That's true.
You
I
know,
should have laughed.
so maybe
You could tell mine wasn't a perfect. Mine were. I have perfect children, of course.
Yeah, of
The
course.
arrival was rather bumpy.
And I also don't want to, I don't want to minimize that they're traumatic, that they can be traumatic, right? So don't be fearful to share, but also we understand if you're not in a place to share where that feels good for you, we don't want you to do that either. And also, just because you share today may not mean you want to share tomorrow. So leaving grace and room for all of the above.
And the important thing is that there are so many different types of birth stories, as you noted, but the response to what happens when people are giving birth is disproportionate negative impact on Black women, and that is not okay. And I think that keeping our eye on making sure that we move forward policies that actually increase access to adequate healthcare for everyone is so important. And things like the legislation that Tina has mentioned and the public policies that we need to keep pushing forward are so important to actually making sure that everybody has access to have healthy babies,
Yes.
Yeah. What are your closing thoughts? We have about a minute and a half left. What did I leave out?
Gosh, you didn't leave out anything, but I think I'm going to put an exclamation point on sharing your story, connecting with your neighbor, and being in community. I just think it's really hard right now, and the more that we do that, normalize what's going on, being okay with not being okay. I think that's really important, and know that your voice matters, even when it feels like you're shouting into the void. Your voice matters.
It does. It really matters. And we can move policy at the state level. Sometimes we can still move policy at the federal level. And by moving policy, I mean opening avenues for everyone to thrive. All hope is not lost. And also, please, everyone, make sure that you are registered to vote. Speaking of all hope not being lost, make sure that your friends, family, and neighbors are registered to vote. And make sure you vote in every election, because we need leaders who reflect and respect who we are as country, and that means every single one of us. So we need to get there, and to get there, we also need to keep voting. And Tina, do you have any voting thoughts?
Oh my gosh. Check your voter registration now.
Yeah.
Right? Check your voter registration now. Make sure that you're still on the voter rolls. I've heard stories of folks who've, gone in to vote and didn't found out that they weren't on the rolls. Thank goodness they were going in an early vote. So check your registration. Even if you voted in a primary recently, go ahead and check your registration just to make sure.
Thank you so much for being on, Tina Sherman. Thank you for all you do, and congratulations on your big victory.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. Next up, student loans. They're in crisis. What you can do and what's happening. And we are joined right now by a spectacular, extra spectacular guest, Julia Barnard with the Debt Collective. Hello. Thank you for being on.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that you're on, because debt is so important, and school debt, college debt, student loan debt is such a big deal for so many people in America. And there has been a lot going on with student loan debt recently. I'm wondering if you can, before we dive into specific questions about it, give a little update about what has been going on related to student loan repayment plans recently.
That's not an easy update, but I will
No.
do my best. I think maybe the upshot is during the Biden administration, there was a serious effort to cancel student debt and bring down the cost of student debt repayment for the 44 million Americans with student loan debt. And each of those efforts kind of in turn were opposed in the courts and unwound by attorneys general who were opposed in general to student debt cancellation and lower repayment burdens on the grounds that it would take profits away from private student lenders or lenders affiliated with state governments, like in the case of Missouri, and that it would disincentivize public service by making public service loan forgiveness too achievable. So those efforts kind of stalled tragically, although 5 million people had their loans canceled during the Biden administration, which is a beautiful success as well. But basically, at the end of the Biden administration, we were kind of in a situation where debt forgiveness was being stymied in the courts. Student loan payments were turning back on after years of forbearance related to COVID, and borrowers didn't know what to do. So basically, the Biden administration, exited stage left saying, hey, we're on this on-ramp period. People need to figure out what to do, but we're not going to do negative consequences quite yet. Enter the Trump administration, and Trump said, yes, we're turning on negative consequences for non-payment. And in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, basically, the Congress passed a bunch of new rules regarding repayment, making it basically much more expensive for most people. And so some of the lawsuits that kind of started during the Biden administration, for example, about refordable payment, are actually still ongoing. They have not completely been lost yet. However, I think basically millions of people now are in a situation where payments are coming due for the first time in a long time. They're generally very unaffordable. I was on a call this morning with someone who was going from, a forbearance related to the SAVE repayment program into $700 payments. So I think this is going to be a massive hit to a lot of families. We know that more people are in delinquency and default than have ever been on their federal student loans. And of course, some of the rules are changing going forward. So that's my best effort at a quick update of where we are.
Thank you. That was a really, really, really good update, and I appreciate the effort. When we're looking at this, do you think that the rollback by the Trump administration of the student loan repayment plans that allowed people to live and work and, afford the cost of living is going to impact people's ability to now afford cost of living, especially in a time when we're in an affordability crisis where the cost of food is going up, the cost of childcare is going up, the cost of everything is basically going up, the cost of healthcare is going up, as Donald Trump's proposed budget right now actually says that we need to increase it by over $1 trillion for the military and,
Right.
delete healthcare, basically. So what's it going to mean in the middle of an affordability crisis that's happening for people to have these repayment plans altered in the way that Donald Trump's altering them? And
Yeah. Unfortunately, I do feel like I'm the bearer of bad news on this. I think it's a disaster for millions of American families. Like I said, I was talking to someone today who's not been in repayment because of their income based on the COVID pause and then the introduction of the SAVE affordable plan, and now going back into the plans that are currently being made available. And this person is going from a $0 payment to a $700 payment. And this is a public school teacher, cannot afford those payments at all. And I talk to people like this day in and day out. So I think it's bad politics. I do think it's hostile to working people. And I think, honestly, I think the student debt crisis is at a point where a lot of politicians are simply throwing up their hands and saying, we really can't solve this. We don't know what to do. I think it's interesting that a lot of the changes from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act are only going into effect, late 2028 after the midterm cycle. I think, yes, I think it's bad politics. I think it's bad for most people. I haven't spoken to one borrower, and I speak to borrowers, on a daily basis that will benefit from these changes.
Yeah, not only that, it's not going to help the economy or anybody if a whole bunch of people are pushed to default on loans, right? Like, we want to set up a structure where we aren't basically making default mandatory. Like that's what's happening right now. It's awful. So when we're looking at this, I also am curious about a new annual cap on the Parent Plus loans and its impact. So first of all, what are Parent Plus loans? And then second of all, what are the impacts of the new annual caps?
Yeah. So like I said, there are going to be changes based on the One Big Beautiful Bill Act going forward. So this is one of those. So Parent Plus loans are a type of loans that parents can take on behalf of their children who are going to be students, in order to help them cover costs. That can include tuition. It can also include cost of living. There are other loan types such as Graduate Plus loans, that are also going to be capped, like newly capped. And those are just for graduate study. And the One Big Beautiful Bill Act put caps on both types of loans, dependent on programs. But I think these, again, are going to leave most families in a worse off position. I think the idea or the goal of caps, I think some policymakers think, if we implement caps, a lot of schools are going to get their prices down to where that cap is in order for people to be able to attend. But as far as I know, that has not happened at all. And I think the real effect is that this is pushing people, into more dangerous loan types. So private loans, which don't come with protections like affordable repayment or public service loan forgiveness, no types of cancellation or very few types of cancellation are typically available on those loan types. And people might even, use subprime products, really dangerous products. People might put tuition and costs, like other costs on credit cards. And I don't think any of this is going to help anyone.
And
Except
what do you,
maybe private lenders.
yeah, exactly. What do you think is going to happen to low to middle income families who are trying to bridge a gap between federal aid and the actual high cost of a 4-year degree?
Exactly. I think in some cases, I think, of course, those people will take on those more dangerous debt types. I think in some cases, maybe those families will decide not to pursue higher education, which is a tragic outcome of its own. I think in some cases, they might choose an institution that they otherwise would not choose. So I think in general, this is not going to achieve the policy outcomes that policymakers say they want, like institutions lowering tuition, for example, like instituting price caps. But rather it will simply lock certain types of students out of higher education or make it kind of a lifetime debt sentence to pursue higher education, which is, I think, a tragedy.
Why, and I have an idea of the answer of this myself. So why is it important to allow people to have the choice of pursuing higher education? Why is that choice important?
What a deep question. I mean, I always think a lot about Lyndon B. Johnson, who was the president who signed the Higher Education Act, which is actually still the law that most of our system is kind of based around. And he gave a speech at his own alma mater in San Marcos, Texas, about how he didn't want his children or his children's children or the children, Americans, to have to make decisions about higher education based on money because it's a public good that we all need. We need our nation to be competitive internationally. We need our doctors. We need our teachers. We need higher education is a public good. That was kind of a consensus in our society. And I think over the years, that consensus has eroded. And here we are now kind of viewing higher education as a private consumer good, which I think, again, is tragic. We know that we want our fellow citizens to be educated in order to, of course, make us competitive on an international scale, teach us, take care of us as doctors. And to me, there's also an element of simply personal fulfillment, the development of human potential.
I mean, 100%. So what can people do? We are in a student loan crisis. Yes. For sure. So what can people do?
Yeah, it's so important to me to always talk about that because I know the news is bad. The first thing is I do really encourage people to take a little time to reach out to their senators and representatives to talk to them about how confusing it is, how unaffordable it is. I don't think policymakers always understand. And then I do encourage people to do their research on where their representatives stand as they get ready to vote. I think that this should be a kitchen table issue for voters. So that's number one. Number two, I hope people will join us at Debt Collective. I talk to people every day who, have a lot of shame and sadness around their student debt, and we like to say you are not alone, and that debt is a form of social control. It is not an individual failing. This is a social failing, and we're stronger together. So we at Debt Collective have a lot of opportunities to get involved, to take collective action to push back on some of these bad changes. And again, I do think we can win this. These are political decisions. We can make different ones.
Yeah, 150%. How do people get involved with Debt Collective?
Oh, people can visit us at debtcollective.org. You can become a member. You can join. We have events, almost every day of the week. You can join us at one of our events. You can follow us on social media. Yeah, so reach out any way people want. People can reach out, on our contact us form, and we get back to people. So we're happy to help point people in the right direction on their personal situations. But of course, our goal is to pursue collective action.
I love that. Yeah, thank you. And what's bringing you hope? I mean, this is a whole bunch of bad news about student loans. What's bringing you hope?
Yeah. Honestly, I've been talking to a lot of people lately who have been able to put their student loans kind of out of mind for a while. And because the student loans are top of mind right now, because people are kind of re-entering this expensive repayment process, I think I see anger, disappointment, fear from people. And I see a lot of people wanting to channel that into action. And I do think this is a winnable issue. I think this is all political, and we can make different decisions as the public. So that's giving me hope. Earlier this year, we got forced collections on defaulted loans turned off. Usually the federal government can garnish wages or take tax refunds to repay defaulted federal student loans. But after a large outcry by the public, the Trump administration actually backtracked on that and temporarily paused those consequences. So like I said, I think it's bad politics. I think when people speak enough, share their stories, get loud about how harmful something is, our politicians listen sometimes. So that all gives me hope. We've had wins this year. I think we can have more. So I hope people will join us.
And we're looking at the midterms. You said that a lot of these really horrible parts of the big, horrible, awful bill of doom will go into play after the midterm elections occur, which is, by the way, listeners and viewers, a political tactic to blame what's happening on somebody else. I'll just say it. Do you think that if we have a changed Congress, they can roll back some of this malicious policy?
That is my sincere hope. And we're already working with politicians on either side of the aisle on preparing for that, trying to, codify affordable repayment options, trying to make sure that some of the most chaotic outcomes never occur. So again, it hasn't happened yet. We can stop this from occurring. We stopped forced collections. I think we can stop all these horrible changes as well. Some of them are going into effect this summer. But again, I think if people can take a little bit of time out of their day, talk to their representatives about how confusing, how harmful, how terrible these changes are, I genuinely think it matters.
Thank you so much for being on. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for fighting for everyone. Thank you for fighting for justice. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Julia Barnard with the Debt Collective. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for our show today. So much for tuning in as if we tackle the top topics facing our nation in a way that requires the most boring disclaimer on the history of the planet Earth. Here goes. Views expressed on this show are those of the individual speakers and should not be attributed to MomsRising, to this station, or to any news or social media service that may disseminate a recording of this show to the public or to any segment of the public. Boom! We'll catch you next week.